Okay, well, it's 10 o'clock. Thank you everyone for signing on to our second webinar in this series called Restart Hawaii. It's really an effort by transactional attorneys in Hawaii to help our fellow Hawaii people, especially those who have lost their companies or lost their jobs, to get back on their feet and not to let the legal expense or complications stop you. And so our goal today is to really equip you to get going on your own, or at least to do as much as you can on your own so that your legal expense can be minimized. And so what we're trying to do is really arm you to be able to do that. This week we're talking about how do you, once you've decided to go and what kind of legal entity you want, is how do you get going? And so we're going to talk today about how do you actually get going. And I'll turn it over to my colleague, Kat Taschner. She's going to introduce you a little bit to Business Law Encore, which is the organizer of this series. And then she's going to start the webinar by discussing S corporations. So Kat, could I turn it over to you?
Sure. Hi. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I apologize. There's a little bit of lawn maintenance going on outside. So I'll try to keep my my mic on mute as much as I can. But in any event, thank you for joining us. My name is Kat Taschner. I, along with Greg, am one of the co-founders of the Business Law Corps. So we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We formed almost exactly 10 years ago. And the core purpose of the Business Law Corps, we call it the BLC, is to provide free or pro bono legal services to Hawaii's small business and entrepreneur community. So one of the things we're really excited to do is, this 8-part Restart Hawaii series, where, as Greg mentioned, we really want to support our community and help people get back on their feet, particularly in the wake of COVID-19. So, the Business Law Corps, we are doing the seminar series. We also offer other services that might be of interest to you small businesses out there. One of them is, every week we provide 4 free 30-minute appointments where you can sit down and talk to a lawyer about whatever business law related question you have. So for example, if after watching the seminar you decide, I really want to talk to somebody about my specific situation and whether maybe an S corporation or LLC is appropriate, that would be something that we can set an appointment for you with. We do the appointments every Wednesday from 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock. And we do them through partnerships with organizations. One of them is the Patsy Mink Center, which is housed at the Richard Street YWCA. And the other is through the Entrepreneur Sandbox, which is an HTDC sponsored program in Kaka'ako. Right now, we're doing all of the appointments virtually. So especially if you're not in downtown Honolulu, or if you are even on the neighbor islands or elsewhere, we hope that these appointments will be available to you. So anyway, with that, I guess we can get started. Let me pull up my screen and we can get started on the slides.
And I did make you a co-host, so hopefully this will allow you to do that.
I sure hope so. Okay, do you see my screen? Is it a thumbs up, Greg? Cool. Okay, so today we'll talk about get going, how to form, and I'll cover S corporations. Greg will cover LLCs. And this really follows on some of the information that I think was presented last week. Just as a really quick recap, last week, I believe Ryan Hugh went over the various entity choices that you may select when you are starting your business. The entity choice that you make very much depends upon what your personal goals are for the company. On the slide are some, but not all, of the examples for entity choices. So, again, I think as Greg mentioned, if you do want to learn more about, the particulars for those choices of entity, we will be making that webinar available and the materials available at the end of the webinar series. So tune in for that. But For the most part, for most small businesses at least, the two most popular entity choices are either an LLC, a limited liability company, or an S corporation. So because of that, we're going to focus largely on those two types of entities today, and we'll try to give you some practical tips on how to actually get one of those entities up and running. Let's see next. So for an S corporation, I tried to break down the steps into 3 steps: pre-incorporation matters, incorporation matters, and post-incorporation matters. I just said I can kind of follow a chronological timeline. So we'll start with pre-incorporation matters. The first 3 questions are questions you're going to have to ask yourself, regardless of whether it's an S corporation, an LLC, or C corporation. But one of the first things is your company name available? This kind of tees up next week's discussion, but the first thing you need to check is someone else using this name? The next thing you'll have to ask yourself is I guess these are both along the same lines, who's going to do what? When you're looking at your partners, is it just you? Is it you and one other person? But if it's you and that other person, who's going to be the president? Who's going to be an officer, etc.? Think about those questions before you get started, and then assign responsibilities. I think it's one of the biggest things that I see a lot of businesses when they're starting up with. They trip over their own feet because it's not clear who gets what. So just kind of think about that. And since I'm presenting on S corporations, the pre-incorporation questions that you'll have to ask yourself for an S corporation is, are you aware of the limitations and restrictions and operational requirements for an S corporation? So, the reason why a lot of small businesses choose either an S corporation or an LLC is because it gets taxed once, unlike the C corporations, which get taxed twice. Because it's taxed only once, there is somewhat of a quid pro quo with the IRS. There are somewhat significant restrictions on what an S corporation can do. I put up like a little image of kind of the most important of the S corp restrictions, but one of them is that you can have up to only 100 shareholders. So, for a lot of small businesses, that's not a problem. But if your goal is to go public and you want to have an IPO and lots of investors, you can only have 100 shareholders, and it might be a problem. Another big one, I think, for a lot of small businesses that you need to think about is, S corporations are allowed to issue only one type of stock. That can be limiting if you want to attract investors or financing. Typically, and investors, they're going to want to come in and have preferential rights over the common stockholders. Well, in an S corporation, you can't do that. Everyone is treated the same and has the same liquidation preferences, voting rights, etc. So again, the biggest question you need to ask yourself when deciding which entity choice is right for me is, what are my goals for the company? Whatever your goals are, that's going to dictate what entity structure is the best for you. So as you're going through the analysis of, do I want to be an S corporation, you need to be aware of the limitations and restrictions that are placed on S corporations, because it might not jive with your business goals. The second specific S corporation matter that you need to be aware of is that there are operational requirements. S corporations are a creature of statute. So, the statute requires a lot of, for example, you have to set shareholder meetings, you have to set director meetings, you have to keep minute books. There are more administrative requirements for an S corporation than, say, the LLC that Greg will cover later. And so when you're deciding which one is the most appropriate for you, just be aware that there are administrative requirements for an S corporation. So those are kind of the pre-incorporation questions you have to ask yourself. If after going through that analysis, you determine, I want to be an S corporation, this is the entity choice that best matches my personal goals, then we can get started on the incorporation. The first thing is, you need to select who's going to be your incorporator, right? Again, this goes back to who is responsible for filing the documents. Thereafter, number 2 is you have to actually draft and file the articles of incorporation. So the articles are the document that you file with the state to officially create the entity. Here in the state of Hawaii, there is, the DCCA is the state agency that accepts those filings. The DCCA does have a form of articles of incorporation that you can use. What we're going to provide in our materials is our own form of articles of incorporation. It includes some additional provisions that provide a little bit more protection, or more clarity as to the organization of your document, and goals that we're providing with some notes to the drafter. So hopefully that'll help to guide some of the questions that you may have as you go through, the second step of putting together and actually filing your articles of incorporation. Once those articles are filed, your S corporation officially exists. You also need to, but they need to be adopted, and that's kind of your internal set of rules and how the company is going to operate. We are also providing a form of bylaws in the materials, and same with the articles. We try to annotate them with some helpful drafting tips so that you understand, why is this provision here? Where possible, we've tried to link to the statute to provide some additional guidance, because, as I mentioned, corporations are largely a creature of statute, and so the statutes will guide how the operations go. The fourth step to creating your S corporation is adopting the initial acts of the board of directors. So once you've created it, you want the board to adopt, both the articles and bylaws. You also want to think about, who's your initial board, who are your initial officers, who's authorized to open up a bank account, things like that. And then finally, you can issue stock. Again, one of the biggest things to note with an S corporation is that you can issue only one type of stock, so just keep that in mind. So yeah, those are the 5 kind of big buckets of incorporation matters and the steps that you'll need to take to officially create your S corporation. The last thing are post-incorporation matters. So once you've created the S corporation, you have to prepare the minute book, right? That's one of the administrative requirements that's imposed on an S corporation. You'll have to apply for your state and federal tax identification numbers. So here in the state of Hawaii, you would file the form BB1. For your federal EIN, it would be the form SS4. Pretty simple applications. Both I think you can do online now, which has made it a lot easier. And then finally, you have to file the form 2553. That is the document that officially you make your S corporation election. All corporations are by default a C corporation, and so to get that single layer of taxation, you need to file this form. So again, you need to decide who's going to be the person who's going to file it. The S election, there are some timing restrictions. You can only file it within a certain period after each year. So be aware of that. And again, just make sure you know who's going to be responsible for filing that. So that's kind of creating the S corporation in a nutshell. Again, we will be providing forms to you so that you can actually see what those steps look like. And we've tried to drop some helpful tips. But that's what I have for S corporations. I believe Greg's going to go over the LLCs, and so I will turn it over to him.
All right, thank you so much. I found a little glitch in the materials. I put a link in the chat to our materials, but I had to reload the chapter itself. So hopefully that'll come through. If you downloaded it already, you might want to re-download it in a minute while it's uploading. I forgot I just want to make sure it had everything in it. There is a question in the chat. We do have chapter 1. As I said, we're going to publish the entire webinar series after the end of April when we're done. And so I think my suggestion is try to attend as many of these as possible. As a reward for attendance, you will get the materials in advance. And of course, you can talk to us, which is hopefully a plus. But thank you, Kat. I want to mention also in the series, we're trying to raise the questions as it might occur to the entrepreneur. So the first question was, what kind of legal entity? Today we're answering, how do you form it? In the future, we're going to have a tax chapter. And so subchapter S is tax driven. And you may have questions now about that, which is fine. We'll try to answer them. But let me just tell you in a nutshell, why would you choose an S corporation over an LLC? The main reason is self-employment tax. And it'll be covered, in the future. But, self-employment tax is like Social Security and Medicare. For business owners, you have to do that yourself because there's no deduction. And so if everyone could just mute yourselves if you're not speaking so we can eliminate the background noise. So anyway, that would be a plus on the S corporation side, is if you make a lot of money, you might save yourself some self-employment tax. The downside to the S Corp is you can only have one class of equity plus the other limitations Kat mentioned, which actually makes it really, really hard to fundraise because you can't issue more than common stock to people. And so the S corporation is a lot less flexible if you're trying to grow your company structurally that way, have passive investors, et cetera, and the LLC works a lot better. As a strategy, you could start as an LLC and actually convert to an S corporation when you make enough money to make it worthwhile. So that's a very common strategy people follow. Of course, if you lose money the first year or two, there's no self-employment tax anyway. So you're not saving any money until you actually make money. Hopefully that gives you sort of just a quick overview on why these are the two choices. My chapter relates to limited liability companies, which is probably of the two, the more common entity that we see. It's a lot easier to form. It's a lot more flexible in how you run it, the kind of investments that you can accept. So we find that that's usually a starting point. So let me share my screen. Let me get my slides up and I will launch into this. Okay, I think I'm ready here. So I apologize, my slides aren't as nice as Kat's. She's a lot better at technology and graphics than me. But anyway, it is what it is. Get this going here. So I like to slides in tens because I find that people can't really focus more than that, and I probably lose my focus too. So I've got just 10 slides for you, and the topic is get going, how to form your LLC. Kat mentioned the name, and next week we're gonna have someone talk about protecting your brand, which includes your name. Once you select a name, which is not necessarily an easy task, you should check it out. Is someone else using it? You could do a Google search. It's surprising how sometimes people don't even do the simplest of things. You can check out the state's database. The business registration has a database of every single company registered in Hawaii. You can check out the federal site, uspto.gov. That's where you register trademarks and do a search in their database. You can simply buy the URL, because if someone else has it, it's probably not a good sign. But the question is, how much do you care about your name? If you don't care too much about it, then you can do less. If you care a lot about it, then you better do more. And no matter what you do, there's always going to be a risk that someone will bring up a conflict with their name, because there's no way for you to uncover every single use of the name in the country or even the world if you're going to go international, right? But you do the best you can. And these things that I've listed here are all things that you can do yourself without the aid of a lawyer. If you want to register federally your trademark, your name as a trademark or service mark, then you may need a little assistance. But even then, I have clients gone online and done their own registrations, and you might get lucky and might get approved. So step 2 is you have your name. Now you got to draft your articles. It's called articles of organization, and they're just a few questions you need to ask yourself. They're fairly bare bones, and they're in the materials, which I'll go over later. But the basic choices are: you member managed or manager managed, which means the owners manage the company, or do you actually have another class of person called manager that runs the company? But a member can also be a manager, by the way. You don't have to like hire an outside person to run. Wait, there's some background noise here. Let's see. I can figure it out. Maybe Kat, you can figure it out. Oh, I see Archie's not. Okay, there we go. If you don't mute yourself, I will say your name. No, I'm just kidding. Anyways, so member managed versus manager managed. Number 2 is, are you going to be at will or specified term? 99.9% of LLCs are at will, which means it doesn't end automatically. And then you need to figure out where you're going to be located in Hawaii. And you can have your principal office outside of Hawaii, but you have to have some presence in Hawaii so that, frankly, if someone wants to sue you, they know where to find you. And it's called the registered agent, registered office. And you can hire somebody to do that, or you could just do it yourself. A lot of people will use their home address, but bear in mind that it's going to be published in the DCCA website. So if you do use your home address, everyone's going to know where you live. And you need to decide who's going to sign the articles. It could be you, it could be all of the original owners, or it could be a third party. Sometimes when people are out of town, they'll have someone else sign it for them. Lawyers are often asked to do that. You sign the articles, then you got to go file it. So you can either go downtown to the DCCA, which is the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs. They're in the building right next to the post office downtown. You can file it online, which means you have to input the information into the online form, and then you can file it that way. And then you can either go regular system, which means it'll come back within 5 days, or you can expedite it, which means it'll come back within 3 days or less. If you're in a rush, then you might want to use expedited. And I think the cost is fairly modest. Maybe Kat can correct me, or our interns, but I think it's, I don't even want to say, let's just say it could be $50 or in that range. Stefanos, maybe you can look that up for me, and we can report that out. So once you file your articles, and let's say it comes back from the state approved, and that takes 3 days or 5 days, depending on how you file, then you can go ahead and get your federal tax ID. And I do know that a lot of people get their federal tax ID, which you can get online, immediately when they submit their articles. And that's fine as long as the articles come back approved. But what if the state says you have to change your name? But then your federal tax ID is in the wrong name, right? So we always recommend, why don't you wait a few days, make sure the articles are accepted, and then you can go ahead and apply online for your federal tax ID, which takes, I think it's immediate. It's Form SS4. You can also file online for the BB1, your Hawaii General Excise Tax License, if you submit online. And that's okay to do simultaneously with filing the articles, because the state's in charge of both of those things. And so if there's a problem with the name, then I assume the BB1 would automatically also change. And then once you have your federal tax ID, you can open your bank account. Yay, put money in the bank. So then you're officially a business and you're up and running. Banks will usually require your articles, your federal tax ID, and sometimes they'll ask you for the operating agreement in order to open your bank account. Step 5, okay, you exist now, you're in business, but you don't have an agreement that governs you. If you have a single owner, it's not as important to have an operating agreement, but you should still have a short form agreement, and we can send you one if you don't have one. But it really doesn't matter what it says, because you're probably not going to sue yourself. Although, I guess stranger things have happened, or, take yourself to arbitration. So But if you have more than one owner, it becomes really critical to have a good operating agreement. And I can't stress enough to you, as I tell my law students, you need to find the best agreement you can, closest to what you want to do, because it's nearly impossible to make a bad form good, or it's going to be really expensive and time consuming. So how do you do this? Well, there are different ways of doing it, but let's say you're a multiple member LLC and you want to be manager managed. Well, you need to find a good form of agreement that does those things. You may have certain bells and whistles that you want to throw into your agreement that therefore you may want to find an agreement that's close to that. For example, let's say you want certain decisions to be unanimous. Well, you need to find a form of agreement that has that kind of clause in it. Otherwise, you're going to have to draft it. So, I always say less work is better than more work, but actually less work means that it's probably going to be a better product. I wouldn't recommend, unless you absolutely have to, using automated services like LegalZoom, because they're not going to provide you the most robust agreement. They're going to provide you something pretty much plain vanilla, and it might not protect you as much as other forms of agreement. So then you have the form of agreement. What do you do with it? Well, this is where the rubber hits the road, and this is where lawyers probably add the most value. What are the things that could go wrong if you don't put it in the agreement? That's how I like to think of it. I think of it like a prenuptial agreement when you're getting married. What happens if it doesn't work out, right? What happens if someone leaves the company? Do they get to keep their equity? Normally, if people are getting their equity because of sweat, we call that sweat equity, it means that they have to work for the equity. Well, what does that mean exactly? How long do they have to work? How hard do they have to work? What if they leave before they complete their obligation? Otherwise, what you're going to do is you're going to have a situation where someone leaves and you can't take their equity back and you're working for them for free. And that's not a pleasant feeling. Other what ifs, people might pass away or become disabled. What if there's a disagreement? What do you do? What if someone leaves the company, they start competing with you? Is that okay? Or do you not want that to happen? What if some of the owners need cash flow and so you can't reinvest 100% of the profits back in the company? What comfort does that owner have that they're going to get money from the company? What is the equity allocation? Not all owners are created equal, and some are actually more important than others from a value standpoint to the company. And so you don't necessarily want your equity allocation to be equal. You want the more important people to have more equity so they're more motivated. And that's better for everybody, right? Once you sign the agreement, you might say, okay, we're pal, we'll put that away, hopefully never look at it. Well, that's possible, and that happens, but I would say view it as a living document. Understand what it says, and when things come up that it doesn't address, update your agreement. There's no such thing as a perfect agreement. And what you're trying to do, even if you have a lawyer, is address the things that are most likely to come up. But sometimes you get surprised and it happens. And so I would just say amend your operating agreement. We would tend to amend and restate it and just keep changing it over time to add in the things that you've learned from experience. We've mentioned some of these resources, our website, which is actually under reconstruction now, so we apologize for that. But it's we post forms of documents there. You can go to the State of Hawaii's Business Action Center, which is located now downtown in the DCCA office. They're actually a help desk. So if you go to the regular DCCA, you're only going to be able to file documents. They're not really there to talk to you. If you need assistance, they have a separate operation called the Business Action Center, which offers over-the-counter advice. And we actually have a rotation of attorneys that volunteers there weekly, so you can actually sign up for a consultation. We also provide weekly consultations at Patsy Mink Center and Entrepreneur Sandbox every other week. Every week, but they switch off every other week. So you can contact either of them for an appointment to meet with a corporate attorney. It's all free of charge. And there are actually accelerator programs in town for small business. And I mentioned Mana Up because I like what they're doing. they're helping Hawaii branded companies grow their revenues. And so if you're accepted into their program, they really do a full court press on your company and provide a lot of assistance. And I think Patsy Mink actually also has a program for small businesses to a course for them as well. And that's the end of my slides. I see we have quite a few questions in the chat. But
we have quite a few questions. I think one of them goes to something you just discussed, so I can kind of moderate for you. Melissa asked, each time we amend our operating agreement, do we have to submit the revision to anyone?
The operating agreement is not filed with the state, so it's a confidential document amongst the owners. You should read the amendment provision in your operating agreement to see what you need to do to amend it. But we would typically just restate the whole agreement with the changes in it. We call that amended and restated, so that you don't have to hunt around 2 or 3 different documents to figure out what the agreement says, and have all of the owners re-sign that. Sometimes you can do that with a majority percentage ownership of people signing it, but it's always best to try to get everyone if you can. Once that's signed, then everyone gets a copy, you just stick it in your folder. Now, before we go on with the questions, Kat, do you think I should go over the materials before we run out of time there? And
yeah, that sounds good. I just wanted
Okay.
to pose that question since you had just
Sure.
talked about the living nature of the operating agreement. But
let me and this should be in the let me repost the link to the oh shoot, hold on, let me repost the link to the materials before. Okay, apologies here. Okay, I just reposted the link to the materials, which should have been updated by now, and you can pull that down. But let me show you what I have in there. Just walk you through it real quick, so that we're all together here. So here it is, and I have an index here of what's in it. So we can just kind of use the index on the left to discuss what's in here. So we have the chapter itself, which is called Get Going, How to Form Your Business. And then we have a list of appendices for LLCs and corporations. 2A is a list of major issues. These are the things that I think about when I help people form a business. These are the what if questions that I was mentioning. There might be others, but these are common. 2A and 2A2, 2A3 are forms of articles of organization, first for member managed, second for manager managed. Appendix 2A4 is an operating agreement for member managed LLCs, and it's annotated, by the way. So you'll see that there's notes in here to the user. 2A5 is the same agreement, but for manager managed LLCs. And so it's not as annotated yet. You know, we had some time constraints, but I think I indicated in the box here, the main difference is that it's manager managed. And so you need to pay attention to those provisions. And getting to corporations, we have 2B1, which is the Articles of Incorporation annotated for your use. 2B2 are bylaws for, and which is also annotated. Thank you to Kat. And then we have the rest of the forms, which is the incorporator's action, the original board action. I have a common stock certificate, which I'm kind of proud of. Actually, I think I prepared this like 20 years ago, but basically we made a soft copy of a stock certificate. So you can actually just print them out. It's like, I guess, printing out money, sort of. Used to have to go down to HOPECO, which you probably don't know what that is, Honolulu Paper Company, and pick up blank forms of certificates and type it in. And I was just getting tired of people doing that. So you can actually take this form and use it. And I actually can send you the Word version. This is a PDF, so you can't really edit it. So feel free to follow up with us for Word versions of all of these documents. This is the back side of the certificate, by the way. You have to have something on the back. And then the last two appendices are really purchase agreements. So when the founders buy their stock in a S Corp, what are they paying for the stock? Is the stock subject to vesting, which is the sweat that I was talking about earlier? So 2B7 has vesting clauses in it, and 2B8 has no vesting, which means once you have the shares, it's yours forever and you can't take it back from them. So that's a quick overview of what's in the materials that we sent out. When we publish this after the webinar series, we're going to continue to work on them and add some annotations. And so, there'll be a version 2.0 at that point. But I think for now, this is a good start for you. So I'll stop it right there, and then maybe we can use some time for questions.
Sure. So we have a question from Mobilani, and this is for you, Greg. Is an LLC treated like a pass-through if there's more than one member? Do you have to distribute a Schedule K at the end of the year?
Okay, the answer is yes, and that's the reason you actually choose the LLC is because you don't want the LLC to pay taxes. And so the taxes are being paid only at one level, which is the owner level. So each owner gets a K1. And that's, the normal case. I would want to say, without confusing you too much, an LLC can opt to be taxed like a corporation, which is probably not a good idea in general, because then you're going to have two levels of taxation. And if you're going to do that, you might as well just form a corporation. But the reason people do that is they immediately form a subchapter S election. So they're basically the LLC form, but they're taxed like an S corporation. So it sounds pretty convoluted, and it kind of is, but a lot of times I think CPAs like that arrangement. But anyway,
and that's something that we'll discuss, I think, our tax in our tax webinar, right?
Right. So simple answer is yes, you have to file K1s if you have a multiple member LLC. Next question, or
next,
you can answer some questions too.
Yeah, no, that one was for the LLC. No, I think Momilani's right. It's the single member, right? It's the disregarded entity. As soon as you add another member, then it becomes a partnership, and
Now
you're subject.
That's a good point. Can I just touch on single member LLC? What the IRS calls those are disregarded entities because you're taxed like a sole proprietorship. And so what that means is you don't even have to file a partnership tax return because there's no partnership. So you're taxed as though the LLC didn't exist, i.e. disregarded entity, but you still have the shield of liability. And this is why I always say you should never be a sole proprietorship. You should always form an LLC around yourself because you're going to pay taxes the same way, but you can have a defense to a claim against you. If you can stump me with a business idea where there's zero liability that you have to worry about, please feel free to come forward and I'll try to challenge that. Because basically, this is America, and even if you could win in litigation, you could still get sued. And if you get sued, you might have to settle for whatever reason, So, and plus the cost of having a single member LLC is virtually zero. So, cost versus benefit, large benefit, no cost. Next.
All right. The next question goes to getting your initial tax identification numbers. Would you recommend registering under an FEIN versus GET? You actually need to get both. It's not an either or. The FEIN is your federal ID number. The GET is your state tax ID number. If you are a single member LLC, you can use your own personal social security number, but I wouldn't recommend that. I would recommend just getting an FEIN.
Also, if you have a single member LLC, you can use your social security number for your tax ID, but most people will opt to get an FEIN because it's more confidential, right? I mean, you don't have to share your social security number with everybody.
The next question is, at what point does it make sense to make an LLC a C Corp? What are some of the reasons to do so?
Okay. This is like a lightning round, huh? So year one, if you're losing money, you don't need to be an S corporation because you're not paying any self-employment tax. In other words, you only pay Social Security and Medicare on money you make, profits. Once you start making money, the CPAs will often raise the issue with the client that maybe you should convert to an S corporation because the tax rate on your income, and this is beyond income tax, this is in addition to income tax, this is self-employment tax, is I think 15.9%. And that drops down to, I believe, 2.9% after you pay a certain minimum Social Security, and then the Medicare continues on. So it could be quite a big number. So I think what you would want to do is just look at your profitability, and when it reaches a point where it's worth making the switch financially, that's when you want to do it. If you're not paying much self-employment tax, then you probably wouldn't want to spend the time and money to switch. But once you start making significant money, you'll want to switch. And by the way, this kind of dovetails into another question is when you're an owner of an LLC, you're not on payroll. You cannot be on payroll. You have to take distributions from the LLC. If you need to receive compensation that's similar to payroll, they're called guaranteed payments. And that's a commitment by the company to pay you. So it's like a salary, but there's no withholding. And so you always have to pay the self-employment tax. If you're an S corporation, you only pay the self-employment tax if you set it up properly and you meet the requirements, because there are some exceptions. But in general, you only pay self-employment, you only pay FICA, Medicare, and Social Security on your pay, on your salary. Whatever you retain in the company as excess profit is not subject to self-employment tax. So that's the money you save right there. And so that's why if you're only making enough to pay yourself a salary, then you don't need to switch to an S corp. But once you start having retained earnings of any significance, that's when you could actually realize a lot of savings on your self-employment tax. Okay, next.
You actually anticipated one of the other questions, which was, does an LLC or S corp allow you to pay yourself a wage as an employee? So, good job, Greg.
Yeah, I saw
that. Next question. These are all LLCs, so I'm happy they're all falling in your court. What are the liability differences between a member-managed and manager-managed LLC?
Do you want to take a shot at that, or you want me to keep going?
You're on fire. If you want a break, I can take it.
Okay. Well, from a shield standpoint, just bear in mind that the LLC is not a guaranteed shield. I always tell my students, let's say you have a restaurant LLC that owns a restaurant, and that someone comes in the bar and you're the owner of the LLC and you punch them in the face, just you don't like them, whatever. You can't say, well, that's the LLC. It just doesn't work. Of course, that's a extreme case, but anytime you commit a tort, we call it tort, a negligence, gross negligence, the court might decide that you are personally liable. So it's best to have the LLC because you can always plead it as a defense. Is everyone having an audio problem? Okay.
Audio is working fine on this side.
Okay, thank you. So there are limits on the liability, but the answer is you should have the shield because it's better than nothing. Between the member managed and manager managed, is there a liability difference? I would say generally no. But if you think about what I just said, the risk of personal liability rests on the people taking action. And so if you're in an LLC and you're the perpetrator of something, let's say you fire somebody and they claim it was discrimination. Well, you're kind of in the line of fire, right? I mean, that's pretty obvious. And you might be named in a complaint as a personal defendant. So the more you do, of course, the greater the risk. Depending on what the claim is, the shield may or may not work. It should work if it's ordinary course sorts of things. But if you actually perpetrated a wrong on somebody, it probably won't work. So between member manager and manager manager, there's no difference except if you're the manager in an LLC, you are definitely at more risk than a member because you are the one actually doing stuff. If you're a member in a member managed LLC, everyone's so more or less at risk because everyone has to do something. in a member managed LLC, you have the authority to either do something or stop something from happening. And so I wouldn't want to worry you too much that these are common situations. But sometimes, we think about this. For example, let's say you had an investor. They wouldn't want to be in a member managed because then they're going to be in the line of fire, right? So they would want to be in a manager managed, and they wouldn't want to be a manager. They just want to be a member. And then the managers in that case would probably be the founding owners. And so you can bifurcate the ownership from the management using a manager managed. So oftentimes we'll advise people, even if it's only a few of you owning the business, maybe one of you, if you go manager managed, that gives you more options because you can bring in an owner that's not manager. If you're member managed, you don't have that option. Everyone you bring in is going to have full authority, and then you'd have to convert to a manager managed. And the way we like to do legal work is we want to do work such a way that you don't have to use us in the future. And so we like to set it up so it gives you all the options. Okay, next.
I think another benefit to the manager managed versus the member managed is sometimes with too many members, you can have too many cooks in the kitchen. In a member managed situation, each member has the authority to enter into contracts, for example, on behalf of the company. If there are 5 members and each of them signs a separate lease, for example, one's at Ala Moana, one's at Ward, each of them have the authority to do that, and that can kind of trip up a business operationally. So I also tend to recommend the manager managed structure, just so it's very clear who has the authority to make decisions on behalf of the
I've heard that some banks will prefer the manager managed because they know that you have the authority to sign. That's not required by law, but it's something that I've heard about.
Okay, another question is, does an LLC also need a withholding number if they already have a GET and FEIN?
I assume you're...
Yeah, if there's employees, then yes.
Yeah, I didn't mention the BB1 will allow you to get a withholding number as well. Oftentimes our clients won't get it right away because they don't have money to hire people, but you can get your withholding number through the BB1.
And typically it's the same, number just with a separate suffix. So if, for the state of Hawaii, if your GE license number is, 1234566-01, withholding is all regularly -02. But yes, it can be handled on the same application. Another question, when would you elect to set up an LLC tax structure as a partnership rather than a corporation? LLCs by default are taxed as partnerships. You have to make that separate election to have it taxed as a corporation. Because of the dual layer of taxation for C corporations, very, very unusual choice. I think Greg did go over when it might be beneficial for an LLC to elect to be taxed as an S corporation. I think particularly as the payment of self-employment taxes. And I do think that that's going to be covered in greater detail in the tax webinar that's coming up in a couple weeks.
Yeah, I think in the old days, Hawaii was the last state in the union to have an LLC law because my partner, Russell Kupu, went to the LLC seminar, it was probably 20 years ago, 25 years ago, and said, who is in a state that doesn't have LLC laws? And he was the only one that raised his hand in a huge room. But the advantage is we adopted the model or the uniform LLC law, which is a good product. So if you wait long enough, sometimes it's a plus. In the old days, though, you have to check the box to indicate how you want to be taxed. Today, if you do nothing, you're going to be taxed like a partnership automatically. You have to actually take affirmative action to tax yourself as a corporation and then elect if you want to be an S corporation.
So I received another question via direct message. Can an LLC be a nonprofit? If not, is there less paperwork involved in starting a nonprofit? So the answer to that is yes, technically. A nonprofit organization can be structured as an LLC. As a practical matter, it's very unusual. Most nonprofit organizations are organized as corporations. You can use the LLC structure because it's so unusual. It actually can add some additional hurdles that need to be crossed in order to obtain your tax exempt status. So kind of a convoluted answer. Yes, it's possible, but it is unusual.
I've heard about it. I've never seen it, but I would say from a marketing standpoint, why would you want to say I'm an LLC nonprofit? That seems sort of counterintuitive. I think, you know, I think the advantage of a nonprofit is people think you're not in it for the money. And if you're LLC, it's a mixed message, I think. So I would kind of pose the other question, which is why would you want to be an LLC? You know, running corporations isn't really that hard, and it gives you a discipline to meet formalities. And that's something we haven't really talked about is you have to comply with the formalities of each legal entity if you want to maintain the shield of liability.
And particularly for nonprofits where, I think a lot of people are looking for that formality, right? Part of being a nonprofit is you have increased reporting requirements, for example. I think having that structure is generally preferred. So you rarely
Now, if
see
you
LLC.
want to form a business as a nonprofit, you can form a wholly owned subsidiary corporation and actually make a ton of money.
You can also have LLCs as subsidiaries of nonprofits.
I think though,
It's just a big tax structuring thing. I think the most irritating, response that most lawyers will give you is it depends. And I think that answer definitely applies here. It's possible, but it's complicated.
I think, yeah, if you have an LLC subsidiary, you might need to elect to be taxed like a corporation, because the problem is if there's a flow through to the nonprofit, you might blow your exemption. And so I think that's why oftentimes it is a corporation that's a subsidiary. Let's see. So are there any further questions?
I think those are all the questions that I saw.
If we forgot
in
to
the
answer
chat.
or other things? Great. Well, we will hang out for a few minutes afterwards if people want to discuss anything with us. And our next series, maybe I should put our flyer up on the screen since we have a minute here. Okay. First of all, I want to thank our interns, Stefanos and Christian, for helping us with a lot of things, including putting together this flyer. If you see, I don't know if you can see the surfer in the middle of the ocean on the top left picture. I didn't catch that at first, but I guess that's supposed to be you guys. But you don't have to feel alone. We're here for you. And so here's the schedule. Today we've covered how to form your business. And next week, we're going to discuss how to protect your brand, which has to do with your company name, but also with your logo and other trade names you may have. So we're fortunate to have Greg Farron will be leading us in a discussion of that. And in the future, we'll have how to work with state agencies, including business registration. There's some real resources there that you may not know about. How to raise money, and that's a dangerous thing to do, but if you need the money, then you need to know how to do it. How to reduce your taxes. That's where we're going to discuss S corporations in greater detail, and self-employment tax. How to hire people, whether they're employees or contractors, and what's the difference. And then how to get a lease, right? Find the space, sign the lease. I mean, that's really a challenge for a lot of people, because legal fees, are quite expensive. The legal rates are, $200 on the cheap end up to $500 an hour. And so to be able to get the assistance from a lawyer can be challenging. Oh, I see. So we have a question about the slides. Let me see here if I can make the slides available. Is that okay with you, Kat?
That's fine.
Okay.
Why don't we add the slides to the Dropbox, and then everyone who has that link will be able to access them there.
Well, I didn't give them the link to the whole folder, but I can.
I see.
So let me just do some quick posts here, and then you'll have the slides. Sorry, guys, bear with me. Oh shoot, I didn't do it right. Okay, I posted the links to the Dropbox and you can go ahead and download them now. If anyone didn't receive the materials because you joined late, let please post and I'll repost the link there because I think only people that were here I've got it. Let's see. There's been a question about our nonprofit that we started, Business Law Encore. I'm not sure exactly what the question is, but we started it 10 years ago because corporate lawyers doing good was an oxymoron back then. No, corporate lawyers are sharks that, but that's not true, actually. There's a lot of kind-hearted corporate lawyers. And so we thought that was an untapped resource we wanted to unleash. And so we started Business Law Encore really to almost be like a social network to introduce entrepreneurs to lawyers willing to do pro bono. And for the lawyers, it's very good because they can actually create clients for themselves if they help people at the start, even if they don't get paid. And so that's how, Silicon Valley got going. Lawyers just helping people start businesses. So we started 10 years ago. We're still mostly just in Hawaii. Our hope was to go nationwide, but we haven't, managed to do that yet, but we're here. And so we want to help Hawaii businesses get off the ground. We do match people with law firms who have said they're willing to do pro bono. And we also have a lot of forums online. And in the future, we're going to probably move more towards digital content to provide education like these webinars and of these webinars and materials so that entrepreneurs can find them easily. There was a question about Help Is on the Way. It's really beyond today, but that's our nonprofit that's helping Kupuna who are stuck at home and need help with deliveries and food. And so we have about 200 drivers that help deliver to Kupuna. You can see that at if you're interested in that, I'll put the link. Any other question? Okay. I would prefer if you didn't share our materials with people. We're really trying to reward people that have taken the time to come here and listen to us, which is no easy task. And we will make it available eventually, but if you do have a burning desire to share it, if we could just ask if you could ask us first, I'd appreciate it. Because we can make exceptions, but in general, yeah, we're trying to reward all of you for taking the time out of your valuable schedules and be here. So I think that brings us to the end. Kat and I will stay on for anyone that has any follow-up questions. We really appreciate what you're doing out there. I personally think the entrepreneurs are heroes in society. You create the most jobs and you do the hard work. So if we can ever be of assistance, whether it's legal in nature or connections or business advice, yeah, feel free to reach out to us. If you email us at info@businesslawcore.org, both Kat and I get those emails directly. And so we will respond to you if you do that. And we can share our personal contacts at that point. And I'll leave my cell phone number on here in case anyone cares to have it. And you can text me or call me at that number. Yeah. So I think we're power, right, Kat? Are we good?
I think we're finished. There was one last question that came in. If I've already filed with DCCAs and LLC, can I modify my filing? In short, the answer is yes. I don't know what kind of amendments you want to make. You can amend them articles. to incorporate different provisions. You can also, amend it to convert your LLC into maybe a corporation. But yes, everything is amendable.
But that would only be going forward. You can't rewrite history. So if something already happened, or, during that period before the amendment, it is what it is, and so you can amend it, but it'll only be applicable going forward. And that may not matter, maybe you haven't really done anything, so that'd be fine. But good question. Great questions, everybody. I almost got stumped, but I think I made it through. Okay. Someone asked about a DBA, and this will be covered next week, but a DBA is the same thing as a trade name. A trade name is a name that you want to call your business that's different from your company name. So if you're ABC Corp, but you want to do business as, whatever, L&L Drive-In, you can file a trade name application for ABC Inc. to own L&L Drive-In as a trade name. A trade name is also called a DBA, doing business as. So what you would have to do if you have an LLC that you want a business name that's different from your LLC name is to file a trade name application with the state. If the business name is the same as your LLC name, you don't need to do it. That's redundant. You already own the trade name by filing for your LLC. So anyway, I hope that answers the question. If not, feel free to repost. At this point, I will excuse everyone, not that you need my permission, because we will close up the official part of our webinar right now, but we'll stay on for a few minutes to see if there's people with other questions. Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you to our interns, Stefanos and Christian, for helping. And we look forward to seeing you again. Kat and I will be moderating the future webinars. So if you want to see us again, you can come on. If you don't want to see us again, please come on anyway, because we're not going to be the presenters. And we'll see you in the future, hopefully. Bye.
Hi, Greg. Hi, Kat. Is it okay if I just introduce someone real quick to you both?
Sure.
Okay, so Michael actually went on camera as well. So Michael Lada, he's going to, he's trying to connect with you both, in terms of his business situation. And he has a very interesting story. But just to kind of give you a background, Michael is actually not a law student, but he is actually the partner of the president of LBO. So.
Oh, LBO. Okay.
Yes.
Nice to meet you guys. I appreciate today. A very good class. It was great information.
Isn't the LBO a law school club?
Yes.
It is. Yeah.
Okay, and you're not in the law school yet, or you? I thought I heard.
No, my partner Jess is. So she's the current LBO president.
Okay.
Yeah. So so that's how I got invited over today. So it's probably not traditional, but this is how I got here.
Today was really for non-lawyers. So
okay, good.
You're perfect.
Yeah. So yeah, it's quick story about my retired military, 100% disabled vet. When I got out, started with a company down in Miami, and they were doing hormone replacement and peptides. I developed some intellectual property, and that became GainsWave and FemiWave, which is sexual performance acoustic wave treatments. I was busy building the business, so the CEO and the doc was the owners of the company that I was working for as an employee at that time. And then I learned that I should pay more attention to meetings like this. So I'm looking to do things differently this time and reset up in Hawaii. That business at that time, we focused on the US and a little bit in Europe. So I trained about 400 docs. We did the trademarks. We did, built the company, that part of the company from scratch. So now what I'm doing is I dissolved from all of those. So I'm looking the next 2 years after that, I've been doing research in different IPs in relation to acoustic wave, laser, electromagnetic, and radio frequency for angiogenesis and neovascularization of erectile tissue. So those are IPs that I need to establish and patents, and then launch the new company here in Hawaii. And then I would like to focus this time afterwards at the secondary launches in Japan, China, and then the last one would be India, because we haven't reached those areas. So that's what I'm looking for. And then, how to navigate, if I have a doctor, what's the rules of having a doctor be owner, things like that are, different from state to state is what I've noticed. And then, either getting a local doctor. I have a doctor that I've worked with in the past. He's in Texas. He owns a couple of clinics there, but he got his Texas license for me. I just haven't completed it. So that's one of the things where, what's the rules of having to have a physician be part of the ownership of the company and what those rules look like. And also with the 100% vet status, any grants, any help that I can get on that side of it for legal aspects of setting up the LLCs and then go to the S Corp in 2 years is what I'm looking for to try to establish this. Right now I'm working with a business plan to compensate for COVID because a lot of the stuff that I do is hands-on versus telemedicine. So I've been kind of waiting for that to chill down a little bit. So I think it's getting there with the vaccines and everything. So that's why I'm starting to look into, starting things up again here in Hawaii and everything. So, but that's me.
What was the question?
Would you guys be able to help with those things? In that, and then, or, will I be learning a lot of those things in the time frames of the next classes and stuff? Or should I be looking for other specific help?
I would say come to the classes. If you're looking for pro bono legal assistance, you have to qualify financially. We're going to have financial statements and all that.
No problem.
Also, you even if you don't have a lot of funds for lawyers, you might be able to attract someone to help you because it's a good opportunity for them. So don't discount the fact that you could entice, a good lawyer to help you because they want to help you grow a great company.
Okay.
If you have money for lawyers, then use it.
Okay.
Because then you can pick who you want. But I think you have a very specialized situation, and you need patent help, right? You need patent lawyers. We don't have patent lawyers. We're corporate lawyers. And so patent lawyers, I never heard of one working for free.
Yeah.
They do pro bono.
Yeah.
So it's going to do $20,000 at least per patent.
Yep. I have one of those in Florida that I can use. So
yeah,
I can fix that.
Okay.
Part.
So it sounds like you have resources. So I'm not sure BLC is really the right fit for you. But I think the other thing is you want to find a local doctor. One that comes to my mind is Dr. Hank Wu, W-H, because he's an entrepreneurial doctor, and you should look him up. For example, he invented he called it a Viagra for women called Argin Max, which is sold at what are those?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
What is that? Yeah, it's sold in the supplemental stores.
Yeah, it's L-arginine. Yep.
So I think it's done quite well, but he's very entrepreneurial. He's done pharmaceuticals. He's done biotech. So he might be the person for you to reach out to. And
okay, Hank Wu, W-U.
W-U-H.
Okay, thank you. I will. Yeah.
Hi, Greg. Hi, Kat.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't see the screen.
Okay. This is Momi. I had a little.
Okay.
Can you see me now, Greg?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for offering this non-lawyer platform. I appreciate it. So I connected to several nonprofit organizations, one in Molokai and here in our YNI district in our community. And I do bookkeeping and administrative services. So I kind of branched out on my own and starting a new, my own company and doing some bookkeeping and administrative. The question that I have is that in my work, I meet a lot of kupuna, and thank you for help is on the way. And I had this idea to help kupuna And I come from my mother-in-law had dementia, and I knew the paperwork that I took involved to, get all the medical directives, the power of attorney and all of that stuff. So I kind of had this idea to help the kupuna and, and the families by using the apps that are available, the legal, the lawyer apps that's online. So I was going to use that because it's free and you can kind of type in the information and get that ready. And if it's from a legal app firm, I'm thinking that it's okay, right? To pull down these forms for these people so they don't have to go to a lawyer and pay $300 an hour. To set up a system such as that for those documents. Some are bedridden, they can't get out of the bed. So I was thinking, when my brother-in-law was in the hospital, we had to pay $150 for a notary to come and notarize the documents. And I found Notarize, which is actually several states are legal. They're legal to do notarization for us in Hawaii, so they don't have to get out of bed. So Notarize is like $25 per document. I'm just trying to make it feasible for our kupuna and for their families. So Greg, I'm trying to start up something where I could do that forms, have the notarized come in and do the notary, and then they have the documents that they need to proceed. So I did one for a family, and documents went to the pension fund because her husband having dementia, so she needed those documents. Everything went well. My question really is that a good thing? Because it's coming from pu'uvai mai. It's coming from the heart. It's something that I do free, of my time, but I don't know if I should be doing that, or, if that's something good, but sometimes good can turn out to bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I hear you. I think in life you have to take personal risks if you want
Yes.
to be good. So I don't believe in protecting from all liability, because then you're not going to do anything really significant.
Mm-hmm.
However, I would say at a minimum you want to probably form an LLC that does
Okay.
it, because something could go wrong.
Yes.
And
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
it may or may not protect you, but you'll be really much happier if you have the LLC doing this business.
Okay. So so I did form an LLC, and when I'm doing this when I come to the kupuna and their families, I'm very transparent. I'm letting them know that I'm using documents that are shared with me, right? And I tell them where I'm getting the documents. Yeah. And then also that I'm not a lawyer. I'm doing it as a volunteer. I ask for no money, so, and this is my time. Even to the point where I'm sending the forms to the pension and people certified, right? So that they get it. So there's no money exchange, and I have documents in place where they're signing, the acknowledging that that's what I told them, with a follow-up sheet of documents for that they signed, that the documents that I did, so I'm trying to be really professional and cover myself as much, but I want to do a good thing. And like you said, there's I'm not going to be covered, but if it's under my LLC, then I'm kind of partially covered, right? So there's no form against me as an individual.
Okay, I'm sorry if I missed the question.
Oh, okay. No, I'm just commenting on being in an LLC now, and that what I'm doing, even for good, for the kupuna doing that, I would be covered to some point. It's not going to come against me, right? Because now that I'm formed as an LLC.
You would plead a defense that it's
okay.
LLC, but whether you win or not, we can't predict. Depends on the facts. You might also buy insurance that could help you.
Okay.
Insurance.
Yes.
It may not be that expensive. You should inquire.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So is that like insurance to protect, like general liability or error and omission?
I would say liability, error and omission. Yeah, I'm not sure. That's beyond the piece, but to cover negligence would be good.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Kat and Greg. I'll be on the next call for sure. On the
awesome.
next webinar.
Are there any other questions by anyone? I noticed there's some people still on. And I need to break off in a little bit. So last call for questions. If not, thanks for hanging on and listening. We always appreciate that. Okay, well, let's bring this to a close. And maybe if Christian Stefanos can stay on just for a minute so we can regroup. And just for a minute, that'd be great. So have a great day, everyone. Stay safe, stay dry.
Mahalo.
I hear my weed whacker guys outside now, so it's gonna get. Sorry, I told them till 11, so yeah. Okay.
Thank you again. Mahalo.